Thank you all for attending. I don't know how many people are here. 68, which is about 50% of the 137 people who did register. For those of you that were unable to attend but did register, again, the videos are going to be posted onto YouTube. It'll give you the opportunity in order to go through this at your leisure. This is a satellite meeting the day before the Cal OER meeting. So for those of you in California, if you haven't registered for the Cal OER meeting, I encourage you to take a look at it. It's going to be really exciting. And again, it's Wednesday and Thursday of this week. So let's get this thing going here. When I teach my classes, I oftentimes have to emphasize the things that are important, and the thing that's most important here for at least writing down something is this URL right here, launchpad.libretext.org. And this URL is a link that goes to what we call the Launchpad. The Launchpad is a map of the LibreVerse. And the LibreVerse is our interconnected ecosystem of technologies that's designed in order to address the goals that we want to be able to address, which I'll talk about in a moment. The key point is if you ever get lost, you can go to this Launchpad. You can also access the Launchpad anytime you see a little rocket ship, typically in the upper left-hand corner of any parts of the LibreVerse, which gives you, again, a map on how to peruse these things. We're only going to be discussing the ADAPT homework system. Although the studio, which is our H5P repository, is a component of ADAPT, we're not going to be discussing any of the other aspects here, including the libraries, which hosts over 1 million pages of OER content, open educational resource content, and several other components here. But I encourage you, if you have an interest in order to review those things, to review the videos that are on the YouTube channel. So, I mentioned our goals, or at least our core value, and this is the core value that we have. The LibreText team believes that students are not a market to exploit, and nor to make an obscene profit off of. And that's a relatively simple statement. However, for many of us, I think maybe all of us who are faculty, we're participating in a system where we have companies, agencies, individuals that don't believe in this core value. And I was when we started the LibreText project, initially called the ChemWiki project, it was this that motivated us and motivated all the people who volunteered and contributed to our project. So it was in 2008 that essentially we came up and we felt that we were a critical component in the chain that was involved in exploiting students, and we wanted to be able to change that. And we were motivated by the fact that we were upset by the way things were going. And I would say I'm still upset with the way things are going. So the big goal that we're trying to do is essentially break the golden handcuffs. And when I say golden handcuffs, I'm referring to what commercial publishers put onto faculty when they actually adopt the material in the class. Because when faculty come in, they oftentimes come in and say, here's the textbook. And they say, oh, yeah, well, you also need a homework system. You also need ancillary materials. You need a question bank. You need presentation materials, power decks, interactives, and a range of other things. Publishers have recognized this sort of one-stop shop situation is how they're able to get ingrained into classrooms, and also make it difficult in order to extricate them or be extricated from those classrooms, because you have to provide the homework and the textbook and the ancillary materials. You need a wealth of different technologies in order to focus on different aspects, and that's what the LibreVerse is designed for doing. So no one technology is able to address all these things, and that's why we have pursued what we've been pursuing here. So the mission statement that I oftentimes like to put down, the more codified version of our goal, is that we're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption of OER that is comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. Each of the words that are bolded, these 3 C's, are particularly important in terms of dictating the bigger approach that we are using. Each of the words, or the important words in the parentheses, the construction, curation, adoption, adaption, are necessary in order to be able to advance those goals. And if any one of those 4 are not actually addressed appropriately, we feel we're not going to be able to address the big goal that we're trying to do. So community means anybody and everybody who wants to contribute and to use the platform that we have, which is you. Uh, uh, but it may not be always you. It can be other people in the community, other faculty, other administrators, students, external subject matter experts, anyone who wants to contribute content that they have. And I even noticed on the screen several faces of people who have contributed content in terms of moving this forward. This is not a vanity project. This is not a one-size-fits-all project. It's important in order to build a community in order to move forward. We are intrinsically an OER project, and ADAPT is an OER component of the OER project. If you're unfamiliar with that term, OER stands for Open Educational Resource. In order to talk about OER, at least to define it, requires a lot of time. And I'm going to simplify that into two straightforward clauses. It's freely available for students to access and freely available for faculty to customize and to edit for their own purposes. Now, there are lots of other aspects associated, especially legal aspects, and there's even some contention about what constitutes OER in the community. I'm going to brush that all underneath the rug. If you guys have an interest in order to talk about that, when we have time, I'm certainly willing in order to do so. Comprehensive. So I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of California, Davis. We can all agree that chemistry is the best field that we should be studying out there. The LibreText was born out of the ChemWiki project, which was an open pedagogy project. If you're unfamiliar with that term, open pedagogy means that it's using students in order to create non-disposable products. In this case here, the textbook material that we used in order to take the place of commercial textbooks. We started this in 2008, 16 years ago, and the landscape around OER was very different then than it is now, and now it's significantly better for everyone's benefit. But we expanded from chemistry into basically all of academia. So we follow a no gap left behind policy. So we have an interest in order to fill in the gaps that we have in the corpus of OER that we've hosted, or the corpus of OER that's hosted across multiple platforms, so that we can actually address this goal of breaking the golden handcuffs across the board. There are lots of gaps out there. It's going to take a lot of time in order to fill. And it's not just the responsibility of LibreText in order to address that, or the people who work within LibreText, but the greater OER landscape that's there. We also follow a no tech left behind policy. So we like to argue that we are building textbooks of the future. And textbooks of the future, we believe, involves technology. It's a textbook of technology. It's a textbook of interactivity. It's a textbook of engagement. Intrinsically, it involves advanced technology that's put in place. So we follow a no tech left behind policy, where when open source, which is sort of the OER version of technology, is available, we then take it and integrate it into our platform so you're able to capitalize on it and move forward. Now, the homework system is one example of that. For example, being able to take questions in the homework and embed it into your textbook. So now your textbook becomes an interactive homework infrastructure. And this is something that Anton mentioned in the waiting room just about 10, 15 minutes ago, is one example of that. But there are many other examples of utilizing open source technologies to make more engaging resources for your students to capitalize on, under the argument that the more engaged students are with your material, the more likely they're going to be learning from the material, which is generally a one-to-one correspondence unless you're doing something really wrong. Lastly, the underlying infrastructure that we have in place, because it is a community-based platform, it has to be designed in order to be curated. And that means that there are needs in order to be able to update content, whether it's textbook or it's questions in our homework system or any of the ancillary materials that we have. We need to be able to curate the content in order to address changing needs, in order to be able to find mistakes. And there are mistakes everywhere, whether it's OER or non-OER, that can be addressed off of here. So curation is a critical component of how we operate. In fact, I oftentimes argue that we are not a repository, we are a curatatory. However, I'm the only one who has ever used that term, trademark, by the way, and it's going to be a while before this starts to propagate. But the key point is it's intrinsic to us in terms of curating content. Nothing is ever static. Everything is dynamic. Everything should be dynamic, not just to be able to correct issues, but to correct presentations of things. For example, if you're teaching a political science course, basically the last decade, every single week has required a new revamp of many of the materials that are used in that course because of the fun that we've had at the federal level. So this is a study that came out of Bayview Analytics. It used to be called the Babson Research Group, and they identified the curriculum materials used most in text in teaching in the classroom. And the number one most used curriculum material is an online homework system. And that may not be surprising to many of us or to most of us, but a key point is in order to argue, if you want to be able to break those golden handcuffs, we need an effective homework system in order to be able to do it. And that's what ADAPT is designed for doing. Now, ADAPT, we knew that we wanted to build ADAPT from the very beginning of our project. However, it took us multiple false starts in order to be able to get to the state that we're at today. And fortunately, it was thanks to the sizable amount of investment from the state of California in order to build the ADAPT homework system. It also had support from several other sources, including the U.S. Department of Education, and then a handful of other individuals that have contributed financial support in order to advance specific technologies that are there, including several I'll be talking about later on. So if you did not get an access code, and I see many of you have actually been conversing with Josh in the meeting room. You can go to the ADAPT website, and in the lower right-hand corner, you can create your instructor account, basically request an account, and we can go through the procedure off of that. And that applies to anybody or any faculty member, not just those of you that are in this room, but your colleagues across the board. We manually vet every request. The reason for that is we're sitting on a corpus of questions that are meant to be used as a homework system. If we open it up to anybody in order to tap into it, then they'll eventually all become questions in Chegg and Course Hero and other parasitic websites, and it will essentially compromise the corpus for being an effective homework infrastructure. So that's the reason why you don't get an immediate count, because again, we take defending this seriously, which means that if you add questions to ADAPT, which I encourage you to do, we will actually be defending it strongly in order to make sure that it's protected for such. So So the question I may have for you is, how do you build an online homework system that complements the utility of the LibreText infrastructure, which I didn't discuss too much, but it's really quite powerful, and is flexible, dynamic, comprehensive, embeddable, LMS agnostic, powerful, and free and nearly free. These were the criteria that we wanted to make sure that the homework system was able to address. And it turns out that trying to handle all these criteria is one of the reasons why it took so long for us to be able to build this homework system. The other aspect associated with the delay behind it is essentially the complexity associated with the technology. So the answer to that question is essentially slowly and efficiently. Now, again, the state of California has given us a sizable amount of support in order to be able to build this infrastructure for largely the constituents of the state, but everyone in America and even abroad has the opportunity in order to capitalize on ADAPT. The idea behind the construction of ADAPT is to not reinvent the wheel. So we capitalize on what other people have done, integrate it together into a single resource, typically relying on open source licensing. It's similar to the sort of licensing that's used in OER, but different, such that we're able to create something without having to reinvent the wheel, because reinventing the wheel is just wasted time. So dedicate our time in terms of building new technologies, and I'll be talking some of the really cool new technologies that we are implementing. So we use as much as possible free and open source software. In fact, 99% of our stuff is open source software. A few snippets here and there is proprietary that we have permission in order to be able to use, but still is available for anyone to capitalize on via the ADAPT system. So let's talk about what ADAPT is at the big picture. Again, we rely on the fact that we want to build a homework infrastructure that's capable to be used in a wide variety of classes. Because again, we all agree that chemistry is the best field for studying out there, but the technology for chemistry can actually be quite varied depending upon if you're teaching general chemistry, physical chemistry, or heaven forbids, organic chemistry that's out there. But then if you expand the scope to, for example, using biology or using anatomy or using accounting, they require different sets of technologies in order to address it. So we believe that no single technology is able to address all the needs that we want to be able to have adapt address. Fortunately, what we did is we build an infrastructure that's sort of an umbrella infrastructure where different technologies can come in and you can use an interface to them as if they were all integrated effectively without having to go through the details of how to use one versus the other. This is something akin to how a learning management system operates with all the external vendors that come in and tools, and you use it within the infrastructure that's out there. I don't liken this to an LMS, but one can argue that we have LMS-like light capabilities within ADAPT. So as a big picture, the questions that we have are separated into two general categories. The questions that are auto-graded, where the computer, and I'm using the term the computer very loosely, I'll define that in more detail momentarily, grades the student submissions. So it determines whether it's right, wrong, partial credit, and goes through all the stuff that many of us would want our homework system in order to be able to do. The other side is open-ended questions. So the questions in which there is no existing technologies in order to be able to evaluate them, and requires humans in order to evaluate. Obviously, things are changing in terms of what is open-ended and what is auto-graded, especially as large language models start to grow. But those are still in the initial stages, and there's quite a lot of hype out there in terms of what they're able to do and what they're not. And I think they're not able to do anywhere close to what they actually sell to people they're able to do. So 1 second here. Okay, so like I said, questions are either auto-graded or they're open-ended grading. The auto grading requires a technology in order to evaluate that. We actually have 4 primary technologies or classes of technologies integrated into ADAPT for faculty in order to be able to build and to use auto graded questions. One, which is our favorite, is WebWork. WebWork is a technology that comes from upstate New York, University of Rochester. It originated in the middle 90s, when the term web was very exciting. So they combined web and homework together, and hence it became WebWork. We no longer call things web all over the place, but it's an exceedingly powerful platform that's used in math and engineering predominantly, and especially in the upper divisional classes, and especially on the East Coast. On the other technology side, we have iMathAS. iMathAS is the technology that underlies MyOpenMath, which many of you may have heard. It also is the technology that underlies Lumen Learning's OHM system and XYZ homework. Those last 2 examples are for-profit enterprises. MyOpenMath is not for-profit. They have a similar mission that we do. iMathAS complements WebWork in many ways. In many ways, it's actually superior to WebWork. It's well loved in the community college system, especially on the West Coast. The technology that's created in iMathAS can't be used in WebWork, and the technologies made in WebWork can't be used in iMathAS. So what we do is we essentially put them all together to allow people to capitalize on the corpus of questions effectively within ADAPT and not worry about which questions out there. This third one is H5P. Many of you may have heard it before. It's about 11 and a half years old. It was born out of a project north of the Arctic Circle in Norway. And it's a graphical, its strength is in terms of auto grading in graphical type questions, while iMathAS and WebWork are very algorithmic based questions, although they do have graphing capabilities too. H5P is much easier in order to use, but H5P has serious issues that need to be addressed. One is security and one is accessibility, and I can talk about that, or I will talk about that later on. It's gotten quite popular. It was just purchased about a month ago by D2L, Desire to Learn, and it's unclear, at least to me, where that goes, but invariably anything that's purchased by a big company is purchased in order to make money. So I'm a little concerned about where it's going to go, even though it's open source. I'm also a curmudgeon in the way I view these sort of things. Lastly is what we classify as native, which is a broad class of technologies that we fold together into that. The primary aspect of native is what's called QTI. QTI is question and test interoperability. If you haven't heard of that, you probably have worked with that protocol, because that's the protocol that's used in most learning management systems. So when you build a question in Canvas or many other LMSs, you're building it mostly via QTI, although there are some deviations in order to move off of that. It also means that if you have a question bank in Canvas or the LMS, you can actually donate it to ADAPT so that everyone can actually benefit from it. And I encourage you to do so if you're sitting on one or multiple question banks. The same thing applies also to WebWork and iMathAS and H5P. And I think even Anton 25 minutes ago mentioned that he was sitting on some iMathAS questions that are out there. There are other components of native classification than QTI. For those of you that may be involved in nursing, we've expanded ADAPT in order to address, and this is in partnership with the technical schools in Wisconsin, to address the next generation nursing questions. In fact, it's the only open source technology for handling these things, which is a new set of protocols that came out last year in terms of questioning that's very unique. Or many of them are very unique out there. We've also introduced new technologies, other new technologies, for example, a sketcher that we use for making organic chemistry problems. And that came out a week and a half ago to 2 weeks ago. And we're still fleshing it out and expanding it, but it's a critical component in terms of addressing the broad scope that we have in terms of chemistry. And there are a few other ones out there, including a virtual dissection tool that will be available soon, and a spreadsheet capability for handling accounting and other things. We're very excited about where we're going off of that. Okay, so the open-ended questions are relatively straightforward. Students submit something, whether it's text, it's audio, it's files, and then we provide the opportunity for instructors or graders in order to evaluate them and to submit them. Okay. So you take a homework system like WebWork. WebWork has a series of modules that are all part of the technology, including a problem builder, a problem library, a problem searcher, an assessment delivery, assessment checker, a grade book, and LMS interface. Now, many of these things you have to master, or at least be comfortable with in order to use the entire WebWork system. And then you take iMathAS or MyOpenMath, and it has its own set of modules to do the same thing, which are designed generally quite different, that you need to master, or at least be comfortable with in order to be able to run iMathAS. H5P is not entirely organized like this, but if it were a full-blown homework system, it would have a similar thing. And QTI has the same thing. That would be part of your learning management system. So the upshot off of here is that while each of these are individual technologies that you're able to grab and run with, that in order to be able to master all four of those technologies, you need to master every module on the screen right here, and no one does this. So what people typically do is they get proficient in one of these technologies, and then that's that. And that means that you are unable, if you're mastering WebWork, in order to capitalize on iMathAS or H5P or QTI or many other technologies that are out there that complement these sort of things. What we have done is to take these different modules and centralize the problem library, centralize the search capability, centralize the gradebook and the LMS interface into a single source, into ADAPT, so that you don't need to master the individual components off of here, and you can use it collectively. So in other words, the technology for WebWork is now just basically a delivery and an evaluation component. Same thing with iMathAS, H5P, and QTI. And that means that when an instructor wants to master, or at least use these technologies, they can use them without having to master more cognitive load. It also means that when students come out there and they deal with a question that might, or an interface for, I'm sorry, a set of homework for their Spanish class, for example, and then they come into their statistics class or the chemistry class or their math class, it doesn't change on them. It has the same interface, the same infrastructure in place for them. So they don't need to relearn a new technology. And invariably right now, there's a massive fragmentation of different technologies across the board. ADAPT is designed for multimodal use. Students can access ADAPT directly and use it via the ADAPT website by going to adapt.libretext.org and obviously signing in order to have access to their homework system. You can embed questions from your ADAPT course as an instructor into your textbook. So now your textbook becomes a homework system. So if you feel that students are not engaging with your textbook appropriately, or at least to the magnitude that you feel they should be, which there's lots of evidence that's showing that that's not the case. This is one mechanism in order to help alleviate that, because you essentially made reading the textbook a homework infrastructure, and students tend to do the homework because that's where the points are, whereas things that they consider more optional, like reading, is not high on their priority list. There is no evidence out there. There is no study in order to argue that this mechanism of embedding questions into the textbook is superior than doing it directly. I have a desire in order to address it. I just believe that it is, and I'll leave it up to you to decide if you want to agree with me. So later on this month, at the very end of this month, we will be releasing the phone app, which is an interface that allows students to use the technology that they are native with. In fact, 50% of students that access our textbooks access it through the phone. So the phone is their comfort technology. So let's bring them the homework system through their phone, so you can actually reduce as much of the barrier as possible in order to be able to utilize the ADAPT homework system. This also provides a mechanism in order to take the place of in-class polling system. In other words, if you have your students pay for iClickers, you can use ADAPT to take the place of that and do in-class polling and have all the benefits that you expect off of that. But in this case here, coupled to the ADAPT homework system all as once. For some odd reason, I think it's more economics, the cost for iClicker is about the same as our homework system, but the technology behind iClicker is significantly lower than for any homework infrastructure. Lastly, independent upon how students submit to a question, whether it's direct or in their textbook or on their phone, you can embed those questions, or at least submit those questions to your campus LMS. This is done via what's called LTI, Learning Tools Interoperability, I think. I might not be up on that acronym, but it provides a mechanism in order to, within seconds of students submitting the question, it gets processed to your LMS, if you prefer to go about using your LMS for gradebooks, as many people tend to do. However, you can also just use the gradebook on ADAPT effectively without having to use the LMS. In fact, in some cases, it's better than most learning management systems' way of dealing with gradebook. And I can talk about that again later on. Okay, this is a quick snapshot. I have a video of it somewhere that shows the phone app as it's released, giving a general overview of activities and responses to the students that's out there. Again, it's meant to take the place. It's also meant to take the place of personal response systems. This is an example of embedding a question. In this case here is an H5P questions into a page. This is a LibreText page. This is an intermediate nutrition book from Kansas State University. And again, it makes things more engaging. It can be used either formatively or summatively, where formative means that students don't need to sign in, and ADAPT does not keep track of the submissions and the scores, or summative is where they require signing in order to be able to access. In this case here, Brian Lynchfield uses it summatively as a homework system. In fact, he embeds 350 to 400 questions into his book in order to make sure that students are actually reading the book and give some feedback off of that. And it's been quite productive so far. Okay, so let me talk about why ADAPT is called ADAPT. So far, I've been discussing homework from a more traditional perspective. Traditional in the sense that you have a course. The course has assignments. Assignment has questions. Those assignments open at this date and this time, close at this date and this time, and students submit it. And that right there is fine and dandy in order to address these things. However, there are better ways in order to be able to address that. And one way is an example of adaptive learning. So if you're unfamiliar with the term adaptive learning, it's a catch-all phrase to describe a range of different technologies and applications in which the infrastructure, or at least the interface and the experience that students have with the platform changes based on the individual student. So in the back end, you have a black box uber algorithm-based infrastructure in order to spoon-fed students what they need to study at different points after profiling them over a period of time and saying they have holes here and they have holes here. The issue associated with that sort of approach is it takes a lot of money to build. It's oftentimes quite poor in the way it's implementing, doesn't work very well, especially when you apply it to a wide range of different courses. And I don't believe it builds robust students. On the other end is a white box based approach. So this is based off of decision trees. We call them learning trees. Instead of giving a single question, we give a tree that consists of multiple multiple nodes. Those nodes can be expositions where you're trying to get some information across to the students, or it may be assessment nodes in order to evaluate them, such that when the student comes in and if they fail the root question, they have the opportunity to go into the tree in order to get a deconstructivist approach in terms of what skills they need in order to master that question up there. So this right here, you can think of it as taking a connectivity map associated with how you structure the subjects in your class and dissect it down to just what's necessary to master that question right there into individual skills. So for example, and I apologize for the chemistry-centric example here, if someone has a question that's a Nernst equation question, they need to master multiple skills, including cell potential under standard conditions, including balanced reactions, including logarithms, including reaction quotients, and then tying it all together. So if those don't mean anything to you, that's understandable. The key point is to identify that there are different sub-skills necessary in order to be able to master that. And each branch here addresses those skills, and students can come in and get exposition and learn about those specific skills, such that they can get a do-over and come back up and do this question again, which acts as a carrot in order to get them more engaged. There's lots of evidence that argues this approach is superior to an individual question approach. The issue associated with this is it takes a bit of time in order to be able to construct these learning trees. And we've been doing this for the last couple of years, especially in general chemistry, although we have started to expand into other fields out there. This approach we like a lot. First, it's a choose your own adventure story. Students actually get to parse through the learning trees as they want. That right there builds metacognition. So in other words, the students get to decide what they know and what they don't know, hopefully, and evaluate that and move around the direction that they want to do. This is necessary for better education. This is the opposite of spoon feeding our children, our students, like their children, and have them build stronger students. It helps to facilitate self-efficacy, but more importantly, it gives students agency. They are now engaged in their homework, engaged in their education, and anything, most of the time, increasing engagement increases learning. Now, our data shows that students are indeed learning from learning trees, which is not difficult to track because we have a pre and post, because the students initially study, get the first question, go in, get some learning, and come back up and do the final question. And again, students are learning. It's not surprising off there, but it takes time in order to be able to construct this. And I can go into this more detail, and I'll be posting it in our first break, the construction guide that we have recently put together, and access to the videos, little snippets of videos that we've actually put together on this. So that's why ADAPT is called ADAPT. And I feel strongly off it. So let me put this all together into one big picture here. We have a range of different technologies that are out there. They all fit into under ADAPT. Those technologies may be individual technologies or specific types of questions within those technologies. You can embed ADAPT into your textbook. Students can access it via their phone. It can pass back the scores directly to your learning management system with appropriate review of your campus protocols and hoops and things like that in order to be able to put this together. So that's what ADAPT is. And we're very happy with what we're dealing with. I'm going to skip over a couple snapshots, show you a few pictures of ADAPT. Again, this is chemistry focused because, again, we can all agree that chemistry is the best field for studying out here. This right here is a very simple question. I think this is a work-based question. This is based off of web work. This has a series of numbers here. The question was coded up so every student has a different set of numbers. Actually, not quite the density and sublimation, but the different values right here. So the students have to go through the procedures themselves, and they can't just quickly grab from someone else's scores. This right here is the Open Grader. The Open Grader is our tool in order to facilitate rapid grading of assignments that students have submitted. This right here is actually showing that same question, what the student has submitted, identifying that student that value is correct. You can give feedback down here. If a student types in text, it's written right here, or you can actually download the PDF and things like that. This was designed with effort from my TAs in very large classes, and my TAs were very forceful in order to make sure that whatever we created was very effective and efficient and fast for them in order to really make things work effectively, and it works pretty well. So I think this is supposed to be released yesterday, but we had a slight issue. It might be released today or tomorrow. I may have some examples coming up of a specific question from San Bernardino, and it's our analytics infrastructure. So we have students engaged with lots of interactions with our material, not just in the ADAPT homework system, but also in the textbook, which we track in a different way. So we provide instructors with the ability in order to track how individual students' performance compared to the average of the class. We're able to track time on task, time in review, submission values. We're also able to identify completion of learning objectives, assuming that the questions that you have put together are aligned to a framework of learning objectives or learning skills. Your field may not have that in place, and you may have to implement that in order to be able to use effectively. We also have an early warning system that's part of our dashboard, which provides us an opportunity to identify students that may require intervention based on their performance or their study habits that are available. This right here will help optimize the efficacy of the resources that you've created. It helps to hone the pedagogy that you have in place, and we're very excited in order to release these things. So let me end with a few general snippets. I mentioned our organic chemistry sketcher. This is an example of the organic chemistry sketcher that's out there for those of you that are interested in organic chemistry. This right here should look exciting to you because this is not a simple sort of technology in order to be able to implement and run with that. And it gives us the ability to do things that are more complicated in other technologies to do, like Lewis dot structures and things like that. And I apologize to be very chemistry focused in the way I provide these examples. This right here is another example of, again, chemistry, but it can be used for other purposes. And we're going to be doing this in math at some point, but by the end of this year, we're going to be implementing this optical character recognition for organic chemistry. So students can actually draw molecules, and we can use the phone app that I talked about before as camera in order to do a optical character recognition to make the molecule or identify the molecule that's out there. Now, this right here is a graphical description of here. You can do the same thing with math as you draw things out in order to convert them into something quick for grading, or other objects, for example, caffeine that you can find in a chemistry in a cup right here. So this is machine learning protocols. I don't want to say it's super established, but it's been around the block for a while, and we're very excited in order to start to implement this technology into ADAPT, coupled with the phone app that again will be released right there. Okay. So let me end with what I began with. We're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaptation of OER that's comprehensive, can be curated at multiple levels. We're very excited with where we've gone so far. We're very excited with what ADAPT is able to do, and there's quite a great future available for us. So let me just mention who was responsible in order to make sure ADAPT existed. Initially, it was the U.S. Department of Education via their inaugural Open Textbook Pilot Award that we received in 2018. Before that, we had several grants from the National Science Foundation that laid the groundworks for that. But most of the funding came from the California Education Learning Lab, that's from the state of California, in order to be able to advance that. And I wouldn't have been able to do this if it weren't for the support of my campus in terms of allowing me in order to pursue these sort of things and such. So If you have a phone, I encourage you to take a quick look at this. This will show up some of the interactives associated with ADAPT if you want to be able to see it on the phone. It's not the phone app, it'll be the web app that's on the phone, which works reasonably well, but it gives a mechanism for you to be able to deal with that. I oftentimes give these things out when I give my large presentations, but since we have another few hours left, we'll be going into those details. So I'm going to end this sort of formal presentation right now. I see at least one question in the chat. Raquel, do you think you can chime in and perhaps ask your question verbally if you're still here? I can't hear you though. I think you're talking. There we are.
Try again. All right.
Yes.
My name is Raquel, and I'm asking because there are embedded in especially psychology courses objectives that have to do with whether or not students effectively collaborate. So my question was whether or not ADAPT allows for more than one student to work on a particular project in order to come up with, especially a text-based or question, answer to a question.
There's several levels of things that we've been doing in order to address that sort of nature. I didn't talk about all the technologies that we have been working on. We will be releasing in the next week something that looks like VoiceThread. Are you familiar at all with VoiceThread?
No.
So the idea behind VoiceThread, and this was prompted by a very active Spanish instructor in Chabot College, Christina Moon. And what she wanted to do was to implement and to adapt this infrastructure so that you give a single document, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a PDF or a presentation or video. It can also be an adapt question that's at the center. And then students essentially provide a commentary on the side and threads associated with them. So it's meant in order to facilitate peer communication around that specific question. That being said, that they are not drafting questions or drafting solutions to them other than having commentary on the side on being able to do so. So you can certainly ask them, write the solutions on the side and justify them. So when I give my recitation sections of my general chemistry class, I provide worksheets and I ask the students in order to go through the worksheets. I tell them it's not important for them to complete the worksheets, although I'd like them to do it. What's more important is for them to communicate with each other in order to be able to work them. This was one mechanism in order to help facilitate that, such that I then don't have to force a sort of attendance-based approach for doing these sort of things. Yeah, that's one aspect. There are other things that we have in place for handling what's called open pedagogy, which is something similar where students can work together in order to build these sort of things. But I may mention the VoiceThread students don't just have to write text, but they can upload audio, they can upload video in order to facilitate engagement. Hopefully that addresses your interest. If it doesn't, please let me know and we can have a discussion offline.
Thank you.
Off, online, on, whatever. And that's not here. So any other questions or concerns that popped up? I didn't scare you guys off yet?
Yes, I put the question on Canvas. I mean, on the chat. So earlier you mentioned this one can be embedded on any LMS like Canvas.
Yes.
So do you have a thing? Can you share? It looks like the one that you show is like student get to adapt, separately. It's not on Canvas. So I would like to have everything on Canvas so my student can see it. So I wonder, can you share? And another question here.
Well, let me address that first. So I showed you an example of embedding a question into a LibreText page. I didn't show anything in terms of integrating an LMS as you indicated. What LMS do you use?
Canvas.
Okay. So you can embed the questions into Canvas via several different ways. One is LTIE, or the other one is augmented by the Advanced Programming Interface, or API. Now, if that doesn't mean anything to you, that's perfectly fine. The key point is that you can come in and you can build modules automatically or manually in order to couple an assignment into your ADAPT course. And we have a protocol that's pretty clear about that, and I'll show you some videos and such afterwards in order to be able to get you the idea of what it looks like. In fact, many of the people here also have some experience with that.
I have one more question. Earlier you mentioned like you can use in class to help student participation. So I did with my open math, I have an assignment I call in class practice. And then I have students do, and then I can check that work instantly. So does that work the same thing with ADAPT?
Yeah. Did you say you check the work instantly?
Yeah. So I have like I did do like some sort of assignment, did like homework, but shorter, like 1 to 3 questions for them to follow my lecture. And then after that, I have them do. So as soon as I submit the question, that I can see that work immediately on my open math. So that really helped my student in, engage in class and really well. So is that ADAPT have that feature?
Yeah. So there'll be 4 types of assignments that we'll be looking at. One is called clicker assignments, and that's the ones that you can actually create and release to class. You set the time, you click the button when you actually do so, you get the feedback via graphical description of these things. It all loads into ADAPT database, and then that all goes into your LMS if you happen to couple it to your LMS, that you can get feedback and use that in order to facilitate your communication. But even when coupled with the phone app and such, it's a bit more powerful than what MyOpenMath provides. Okay, so any other questions? Let's see here. Anton says, I'll be able to import a library of questions from Canvas into ADAPT. Yes. QTI questions off of there. Sometimes it requires a little bit of massaging to get in because of a variety of technical issues, but yes, we can bring them in. Jason asks, I'm hoping to be able to ADAPT. False. Will the phone app be available September 20th? Yes. Yeah. It's available now, but it's not. I have to process a few things, and then it has to be reviewed by the store owners, by Google and by Apple, and that right there takes a bit of time. I can work around that, so I can give a link in order to download them for different apps and things like that, or test cases, a type of thing. But it should be available September 2nd. This is August. Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't bet hard money on it, but I think it will be. Okay, so then Amelia asked, yeah, Anton, in bulk. Yeah, so you do an export of your Canvas questions as a IMSCC file. No, as a QTI file, and it's pretty straightforward in order to go about doing that. Okay, Amelia, the ADAPT questions can be embedded in Canvas, or are they linked into the ADAPT site? They are currently the equivalent of deep linking. So you create an assignment and you click on it, and then it pulls it up on our side. We have worked with integrating, so the individual questions are right there. We just need to be able to tweak a few things in order to be able to do that. That's not top on our priority list because it doesn't add any additional functionality, but it has the same impact. Garima asked, do you have any questions related to drawing organic chemistry reaction mechanisms? That's a really good question. So I mentioned that the sketcher that we have in place is relatively new. How new? 10 days old. So right now, the first step that we have with the sketcher is to be able to create a molecule and evaluate if that molecule is correct. And that will handle a lot of questions. The second step off of there is to be able to take 2 species together and start to identify this atom on this, or this moiety on one molecule attacks, to use the parlance, into a different moiety or atom on a different molecule with this specific arrow that's on place. I don't have an ETA on that, but it's active, and I would expect it to all work soon. The Gaia asked, will all work in D2L? It should. The D2L protocol hasn't been implemented. In fact, I just got paperwork 2 days ago from D2L in order to give us access to their development server so we can actually complete the integration. I would expect it to be available within the next month or so. It shouldn't only take more than a day or two in order to be able to implement, but it required approval from D2L in contrast to other LMSs like Moodle and Canvas and Blackboard, which didn't really require such hoops to jump through. Um, Amelia, I'll talk about how to import questions into Canvas later on after we have things in place. It's actually a relatively simple process, assuming your Canvas administrator has implemented the integration completely. If they didn't do it completely, it can be a little bit more painful than what I want it to be. Okay, so those are all the questions that are in the chat. Mohammed has his hand up. So Mohammed, do you want to jump in?
Yes, you mentioned that we can transfer the questions from Canvas to Adapt. Is the reverse possible? Can we download it as QTI file and upload on Canvas?
In principle, yeah, we haven't implemented an export option available. That opens up a can of worms, not a big can of worms, but it just basically adds additional complexity in terms of trying to make sure that Canvas is able to read our protocols on all the questions that are exported, and it would only be the QTI questions that would be exportable in this way. And then we'd have to do the same thing for every other LMS and integrate it and put it together. So that hasn't been a big priority off of that. Can I ask why you'd want to do that instead of just using Adapt directly in your LMS?
That gives another flexibility that we can download a set of questions and use directly on our LMS, which is Canvas.
It does. I agree. But we have a long list of things that we are doing, and this is not the top priority of our list in order to be able to export off of our platform so that other platforms can use the questions that we have. But that does open up a useful comment which should come up invariably and should have been discussed earlier on, and I apologize for that. I mentioned in the very beginning that there were a series of criteria that we wanted to be able to establish when we built Adapt, such that it was powerful and effective and curatable, but also included the cost issues associated with those. So the state of California invested $3 million. Originally it was 5, but they took $2 million back last month for some reason or another for building Adapt. And part of the deal with that was to make it so that all the faculty and students in the state of California get Adapt for free. Now, Adapt is freely available for any verified instructor in order to use as a question bank, period, across the board. So we have 250,000 questions that people can tap into and use effectively. If you want to use it as a homework system, where we have to go through protocols and couple in and do things like that, then we ask there to be some buy-in, preferably by the campus. At the value right now is $10 per student per term, irrespective of how many courses they have, which is appreciably lower than any commercial product out there. Now, the intent that we have here, and actually the way we interpret the OER licensing of some of the questions, is that we can't make a profit. And so if we ever make a profit, we have to lower that price point in order to be able to work it. But we do have to maintain system administrators and programmers and keep track of these things and go through all the infrastructure to ensure that this massive infrastructure that we have in place is actually still operable. And that's what we ask for buy-in, and that's out there. The alternative is if your state wants to give us $3 million, we can actually change that, but no state has stepped up and said they're going to give me $3 million in order to be able to do the same thing that the state of California did. And I can certainly address that in more detail, and there are a few issues here and there associated, but that's the general lowdown off of here. It's freely available for people to tap into as a question bank, but if you want to use it as a homework system and use all the complexities that we have and we're going to be going through here, that requires some buy-in. Again, preferably by the campus, not by the student. Neil mentioned some issues in terms of security. Basically, if we start exporting are questions, and you provide the opportunity for compromising those questions, which would then affect everybody that's out there. And that's a fair question. Although many of our questions already came off of ADAPT and were brought in, many of our solutions were constructed internally, so are not available out there. For example, Mohammed has been very aggressive in the last year in terms of building quite beautiful solutions for the organic chemistry questions that are out there. And we can, if we have time, I'll pull up some of the questions that he has put together. Anya threw in something. What are your suggestions how to start an LMS connectivity at school? It's IT people. Yes, I'll show you a page up that you can use in order to talk about it, but basically we need to talk to the IT people. Every school has its own unique set of protocols, unique paperwork in order to be able to jump through, in order to be able to make this thing work. And that just requires brute force one-on-one conversation in order to be able to move it forward. Okay, so it's now 10 o'clock. We've gone through 1 hour off of here. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 10:10 Pacific time, 1:10 Eastern time. If any of you guys have any questions or concerns, please stick around or ask your questions in the meeting room. This is a good opportunity in order to make sure that you have a your ADAPT account all ready to go, because we're going to get into nitty-gritty detail. I'm not going to pull up any presentations anymore. Everything is going to be real time on the website. ADAPT, are you in the state of California?
Yes, I know exactly answer my question. Yes, I'm living in California.
Okay, then it's free for your students.
Oh, okay.
It's just if you're not in the state, then it costs $10 per
Oh,
student
okay,
per
thank
term.
you.
We also have a cap of $30 per year. Students can never pay that much. We're probably going to lower that to $20 per year.
Okay.
It's just
California
basically,
is free. Other states have to pay some.
that's true.
Okay.
Yes. Like I said, if other states want to give me or give us multiple millions of dollars to buy in, we would be very excited in order to do so. But so far, no state has approved that. Although several of our state-wide LibreNet members have started to have internal conversations around it. So